Welcome to my podcast, The Sexual Shaman, Conversations on Sexuality and Spirituality. I am your host, Kenneth Ray Stubbs. This podcast videocast is a recorded conversation with Caitlin Welby, a Buddhist chaplain who is about to begin training in psychedelic-assisted therapy. I wanted to explore some of my ideas and her perspectives on the use of psychedelics in a microdosing context, a topic that has become increasingly popular in the last few years. The sponsor of this program is my energy training, an in-depth program in developing our energetic infrastructure and our shamanic abilities to transform others and ourselves. More information is available at therainbowbody.com. So what I wanted to do, first of all, if it turns out to be recording for the public, it was Caitlin Welby, and Caitlin has done all the energy training courses and has developed what I call an rainbow body energetic structure. When I first met her, she was a business consultant type role, running a business. At some point decided to go off to France to become a chocolatier and go to school there, came back and eventually has now gone to chaplain, completing degrees in chaplain in her process of getting into formally certified or credentialed or whatever it is as a chaplain to be able to facilitate others in their psychological and or spiritual growth. That's just my quick take, which you can add on to. One of the things that is beginning to, in the last 4 or 5 years, especially since Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, came out, looking at the reawakening, resurgence, continuing depth of research, we'll say medical, scientific, therapeutic research into the use of some psychedelics to facilitate mental, emotional health. Getting past the 60 days, and in the hippie days, we would drop our acid tabs and go tripping. Now so the culture's gone past the freak out of the freakiness of the hippie days, starting to look at this phenomena as something perhaps maybe a really useful tool. Caitlin, who's finishing up her training as a chaplain, anticipates going to become trained and certified as a psychedelic-assisted therapy therapist. And I wanted to look at some perspectives because I think it's a very important change in our society. Anyway, Caitlin, welcome. And do you want to add anything I said? Because I did give a quick summary in case this turns out to be something we share with others.
No, I think you gave a nice overview. The running thread of spirituality, tantra, mysticism has, been through the whole, when I was in conscious business leadership, into kind of the conscious business consulting, which is when I met you, kind of right in that zone in 2016. And, really just went on the journey of the space in between, and then found myself really wanting to give back in service. And I don't see them as very separate. I still end up working not only with in the chaplain role clinically, but also with my private practice clients who are oftentimes entrepreneurs having a spiritual awakening, or people who are incredibly high sensitives having a spiritual awakening, needing to contain it. So some are looking to expand consciousness, and some are looking to have some boundaries around consciousness that is a little too much for them. And so that's who ends up finding me now. But it all ends up being kind of the same work, which is learning to process and be with the reality in which we're dealing with, which for me, that is what a chaplain does, is helping people actually open up and receive reality. And most certainly the rainbow body development that we've done over the last many years has helped me. I mean, it sort of carried me along into the process of awakening to how I bring this into the world and how I move in the world with it. And that went hand in hand with the time period when Michael Pollan put his book out. And that really hit the population wave pretty strongly, because he was such, he's a cultural figure for so many people, and
he's also an incredible writer.
He's an incredible writer.
I read him as a teacher of writing, given that I'm attempting to do writing too, so he's incredible in many ways.
He's traveled many ways. It's well researched. It's digestible for almost anybody who reads it, and it also brings in really multidimensional and animistic frameworks. Like his Botany of Desire brought animism. He didn't even call it animism, but it brought the concepts of how the consciousness of plants are co-creating and co-manipulating culture and reality with humans. And so he really started these are indigenous frameworks that other cultures and other times were naturally received and taken as self-evident. But for the Western mind, these were a broadening and a reawakening to be able to see things in a different way, and how we interrelate, say, with nature beings in a different way. And that, I believe, that framework for him brought him to psychedelics late in life, late in his career, and was really primed and open to receiving that knowledge, I think.
Yeah, most of you is very helpful for me and a lot of other people. Anyway, so now we're into a really open throttle, going into this whole thing about what's being called psychedelic assisted therapy. I think that's the common term now. And it's being accepted, and people are being certified. People in the area of psychology and related are being certified in this. It's like, how did you say it the other day when you first told me about this? It's being like exploding out into the culture,
that it's or it's just kind of like an avalanche. It's hitting the collective consciousness like an avalanche. So no matter what our opinion is, doesn't really matter anymore, because it's going to be wildly and widely available to almost anybody who can access it. And it almost already is, but within the medicalized framework, it will be turned to by the medical professionals that most average Americans certainly listen to their medical professionals rather than go to underground circuits of shamans or healers or light workers or this. So it's hitting the general population in an entirely new way.
One of the things that I really want to explore with you, I'm totally supportive of this continued research methodologies to use and employment of it. I think it's going to be advantageous to many people, and it seems to be a relatively wise and safe type of methodology compared to the street drug world situation, which can be wise and can be very foolish, to oversimplify it. But one of the things that has started to concern me is the glorification and/or acceptance of what is being called microdosing, which means you don't take one or two or three experiences with a trained practitioner to facilitate the process, to go deeper into the impact and benefit perhaps it can take place while in that process of taking some sort of psychedelic mind-altering, emotional-altering experience. But to take it on a frequent, daily or sort of frequent basis, but small amounts, very small amounts. And somewhere intuitively I felt, I'm feeling really not okay about this. It seems like it's potentially problematic, not necessarily, but potentially. So I want to tell you how I came to the perspective that I want to share with you and see what your thoughts are on this, perhaps. So, in my conceptualization, what we are is a being embodied, incarnated with an organism. It's what you are, it's what I am, to oversimplify it. The physical organism is how science and most people think, because it is physical, it is observable, and with scientific methodologies. The more esoteric type stuff that I call a being, for me, is very real, but it's not really so measurable. Things called chakras and the Kundalini have been the predominantly conceptualized parts of these, have been very popular for over 100 years in the West. And as I started exploring this and developed some ability to read energetic patterns, that's the way I conceptualize it, I came to the perspective that what we are as a being, these non-physical energetic patterns or structures, there are 20 such structures. One would be the Kundalini system, one would be the chakras. Those are the popular ones, but they're a total of 20. The average person on the planet is functioning with only 8 of them. What I started to notice is people that I call shamans, they have, at least the type of shaman that I'm referring to, more likely to be a traditional shaman than a contemporary shamanic practitioner, are functioning with 12. In other words, they're more developed. Now, all these energetic structures are inherently available in all of us. They just have to be awakened, so to speak, turned on. So, average person is 8. The shamans have to have 12 to do what they do. People like the Dalai Lama have all 20 of the energetic structures up and running and functioning, which makes them more capable of being more of what they can be. Because in other words, like you're like an 8-piston car or a 12-piston engine or a full 20-piston engine, and if you have all 20 pistons going, you can do faster, greater, more magnificent, more incredible type of functionality in our world. But there's some alternatives. There's some other situations. I'll get to where I'm going here in a moment. When we were first born, and for the first couple of years, most people are only functioning with 3 of those energetic structures. Not 8, not 10 or 12 or 20, only 3. I begin to notice that people that I consider to be energy manipulators or energy suckers are only 3 also, not 8. People who've been energetically impacted by an energy sucker, only 3. But then I recently watched a documentary on Xanax, that type of medication that's used for, I think, antidepressant. And people who were sort of really stuck on it, we call them addicts, in that sense, even though it's legal and prescribed by the medical world, they were functioning at 3, not 8. Then I saw another documentary on Adderall. The people who were caught up in that were functioning at only 3, not 8. So there's somehow a limiting factor when a person gets caught up in some of the pharmaceutical legal drugs, but also potheads and the people who are really into cannabis extensively started to notice a pattern of only 3. So then I begin to wonder, what about people doing psychedelics? And basically what I was finding is that most of them are at 8. But people who go into microdosing extensively, at least it's the way they report it, and I'm able to find this on the internet and read their energetic patterns through their videos and their interviews, only 3. So I am becoming concerned that frequent use of a psychedelic, such as microdosing with, say, natural psilocybin, which comes as the magic mushroom, a certain type of mushroom, if it's done on a frequent enough basis, and perhaps you could accomplish that with microdosing, because you could do it every day, whereas tripping every day would be a little weary making, I would think. They are only 3. Now, I look back at Marina Sabina, who was the Huautla Mexican shaman that was first visited in 1954 by Gordon Wasson, a banker, but he and his wife were studying mushrooms. They went down to Mexico, they heard about this, and convinced her to help them do, or let them do this experience with what we now call magic mushrooms, which was an editor using that word in Look magazine. They called it magic mushrooms, and all that was not the original name. It suddenly became legitimized when Look magazine accepted this extensive article about this unusual experience that people were having. That then led into the psychedelic days, and then again, people freaking out, and it went illegal, and now it's coming back up again. But the point is that I look at Marina Sabina's energy, extremely highly developed person. I mean, this is what a type of person I would call enlightened, highly developed energetic person. She was not, she didn't do, well, I don't know how often she did psilocybin, but it was not on a daily basis. And now I'm seeing people who are actually doing research in microdosing and reading their energies. And even though they're extensive, they're academics and doing foreign research, their pattern is only 3 of these 20 energetic structures, whereas Marina Sabina was all 20 and more. So I'm concerned that while it may be of intellectual benefit to do microdosing, microdosing may be of benefit for certain things, for certain occupations, that there's a price being paid, and in the long run limits a person's capability without the chemical compound in their system. That's the concern that I have. And I finally, only in the last week or two, began to see that pattern, say, oh, I don't know why is this happening and what the impact really is, because they don't seem to be addicts, the microdosing people, but it's affecting them, and I'm thinking in a limiting way, and I think the long run, it will be interfering rather than enhancing. So that's the concern that I have. And you're in this field. Do you hear what I'm saying? Does it make sense? And do you have any sense of maybe that's the case? And I'm not talking about occasional use.
Well, I definitely hear what you're saying. And I'm seeing the through line of like what you were seeing with, say, for example, Adderall users, or, these other types of low dose daily rehabituated brain pattern techniques. And so it sounds like you're seeing the energetic pattern correlate with that,
yes,
which I find very interesting. Well, especially your correlation with energy manipulators.
Yes.
Because it's a regression, it's a regressive state rather than a progressive state, and one that tends to, as we've talked about it in the past, because we've scanned a lot of, say, of the business people, particularly in the cryptocurrency industry, sadly, also probably a lot of microdosers in there that had tended to be in that category. And that could have been circumstantial, like the type of people migrating, we don't know if the type of person that is migrating towards liking microdosing has the proclivities to be in those structures, or if they're reverting back. That's something interesting to think about from the frame that you're bringing it towards. Why medical professionals are liking it and why people are finding benefit is, we could talk about for a second, which is as an alternative to antidepressants and anti-anxieties. And that is the primary purpose for them as a therapeutic use. We're seeing it also professionally used for innovation and creativity, or the guise of innovation and creativity, although that's likely a little bit of addictive upregulation, like liking the excitement of just a little bit of something and thinking that it's getting you to the whiteboard more often. So that's very rampant in the innovation and tech communities, so to speak. But it's also it wasn't Richard Halpert, the classic protocol for LSD microdosing, which is one that has been studied predominantly, which is a subperceptual dose every 3 days for a period of maybe 12 weeks. And then you cycle off of it and you cycle on it as an alternative to antidepressants. So that's what I know from that lens. And so I'm not sure what people or that's why people are attracted to it, because they've seen benefit for treatment-resistant depression, or, they've seen behavioral and self-reported emotional changes. How that has affected them energetically or spiritually, very little research or observation, even self-reporting observation to be done, except for quality of life stuff, self-reporting quality of life, less suffering, better quality of life. I'd be really interested in seeing, and it sounds like what you're saying is it doesn't matter what is being microdosed, that it's the mode of being with these substances.
Yes.
That
yes.
is attractive.
Yeah, I mean, Adderall I suspect, can be very beneficial for some people, but it's too easily becoming, a psychologically, biologically a dependency activity. That's the problem. I'm not anti the use of it. It's just like, because different people have different conditions.
Right. And what I hear you saying is that and we've said this before in circles and together in these conversations, that psychedelics aren't a path, or at least in my opinion, as a spiritual care provider, as a Buddhist chaplain, as somebody who an energetic practitioner and a tantrika, psychedelics are not a path to enlightenment and liberation, but they can be a tool, and
Yes.
they can be a skillfully used tool for spiritual liberation and to break through very constricted patterning that we are in the Anthropocene that we're in. We're pretty clear we're in end stage capitalism, and it's very constricted, and everybody's confused and suffering, and nobody knows what's going on. It's kind of the way things are right now. So it can be useful to pierce the veil there, but getting comfortable as it being a way and a way of being sounds like we're saying it's dangerous, or it's dangerous for your spiritual and energetic structural health.
Yeah. At least for the psychedelics.
Yeah.
But again, my orientation, my bias is what I would call spiritual growth, not religious, and not holier shit than thou. I don't mean that at all. No, I mean, the Dalai Lama is my role model for this. Compassion, equanimity, aliveness. He lives that. He is that. He exudes that, for example. And he's very intellectual, an incredible being. So in a sense, I'm using him as my ideal. I say, okay, this is a direction I would like to go in, not to be the Dalai Lama, but to have his energetic capability to be able to creative for me and for you to be your creative, highest creative self to whatever it is in the world, being a chaplain, being a sculptor, being a composer, being a caregiver, whatever it might be, but to be really profoundly, meaningfully involved in what you are being and doing. So that's my objective. And maybe that's my pipe dream for others too.
It's a solid pipe dream. And ultimately that's mine also. When people seek care from me, it's for them to be fully embodied and fully expressed in whatever form that takes for themselves. So us in the rainbow body frame, it's how the rainbow body works through us. It's not to be the Dalai Lama's or to emulate his dharmic path. It's to fully embody ours in this short period of time that we're going to express it.
That's it, yeah. And I'm just concerned that with the popularization, which I think is valuable, of the psychedelics, a repopularization, that moving in a certain direction is going to be beneficial, but that it might, in certain ways, become limiting rather than liberating. And I don't know if, you're in the world, in the psychotherapeutic world, and I'm not. So I don't know if anybody in that research was even interested in hearing this point of view, because I'm coming in from a whole different point of view, saying, folks, it's useful, but I don't know if it's going to really take you where you want to go in the long run.
Well, that's a hard one. I've participated in quite a few conferences, not as many that I could have on the psychedelic sciences, which there are many now, and they're very popular. And it's predominantly filled with MDs, psychotherapists, nurse practitioners, academics, and all are under some of them take the spiritual realm. There's a few chaplains involved. There's a growing number of chaplains and, say, spiritual care providers or transpersonal practitioners, transpersonal breathwork, Groff work. But it's heavily medicalized conversation, reliant on the academic structures. And also there's a lot so it's called the third wave of psychedelics. This medicalization wave is colloquially referred to as the third wave. First wave was in the 60s when blew everybody's mind open. Second wave was like this 80s and 90s where it was like underground during the drug war, but it came up through the party scene and post Osho into the rave culture. And then the third wave is now into its like Rick Doblin of MAPS, sort of stabilizing it under the research realm and everybody going through the proper channels of the FDA, doing the things that they have to do. And these guys were all kind of born through the second wave. So they ushered in the third wave by playing the game of the regulators to get what their love of psychedelics through the proper channels. And so that's how it's hitting. It's been filtered through the academic and the regulatory frameworks of what was cracked down after the first wave. So we're going to see it come forward in those structures. And that's the language that they're all kind of speaking in. So there's this academic rigor and the empirical knowledge bias. And then there's also this but underneath the button-up shirt is a tie-dye shirt, so like there's still this love of psychedelics. And so they still want to just light the campfire with their friends. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's this sort of recreational underpinnings to it. Like we're playing the academic and regulatory game, but we really just want to party and take drugs with our friends. Again, not bad and wrong, but that's the flavor of it to me. So it's, while that's not to dismiss it, that sounded a little dismissive, because there are people genuinely interested in consciousness expansion, their own spiritual evolution, and evolutionary consciousness of our species on the human Earth story. There are people there that are deeply, deeply committed to that experience and what we're ushering in through that. But for me, it's hard to have the language because everything is so filtered through the empirical data of medical research and academic structure. And so even the chaplains, like why I chose to do this so that I have my card-carrying member of this system that's already in place. I'll have the same credentialing. I'll be a board certified chaplain, that I work clinically, and I'm, regulated and I'm licensed, but I'm a spiritual care provider. Those are my credentials. Whereas everybody else, like it is medicalized. So there's only a few of us that are predominantly only focused on, say, the animist and consciousness and spiritual and shamanistic elements that are inherent into certainly every plant-based ally, but even the other energetic structures of the other drugs that are being used, which the ones that are only one that's legal now is ketamine. MDMA is coming soon, cannabis as well, ketamine. And then psilocybin will come and MDMA will come and then DMT will come. So that's the pipeline of it. And it's a very interesting, choice because it's being backdoored. What's coming through isn't about the spiritual integrity or consciousness expanding potential of these drugs, like say lineage-based drugs like ayahuasca and peyote and iboga, or some of the other hape, or any things that are rooted in a lineage and come from its land and held in that container. And even psilocybin, it's probably processed and isolated in some ways, not always, but it's administered in a clinical way. So I suspect that's all a part of how it's affecting the energetic expansion or allyship with the nature beings that are inherent within these structures, as we've talked about in the past as well. I'm not sure how that relates to the regressive aspect of microdosing. If I were to hypothesize, I would have thought that microdosing psilocybin in its true form would have structural, that it wouldn't do that, but we don't know. That it could just be mimicking some very human restrictive patterns of relying on something external than us. Yeah. And that shuts down our energetic structures, which is like the freedom and autonomy for like pure blissful expression that the rainbow body inherently is. So I could see that being contractive rather than expansive. Does that?
I'm exploring this. I mean, it's only been a couple of weeks into my having some sort of a sense of an energetic pattern correlated with microdosing, which is not Marina Sabina down in Huatla doing when she's no longer alive. But that was a very different context in a shamanic culture, in a spiritual context. And I don't know what it is. I'm exploring it. You're one of the first people I've started to talk to about this, trying to figure out what is this. I'm going to continue to look at it through my particular methodologies of reading energetic patterns, try to see what's going on. I wish that people who are legitimizing this expanded behavior and acceptance in the culture were aware of this factor also as something to be tuned into and to question and to bring into the research if possible. But you're saying that in the medicalized version versus spiritual development version, I keep thinking they're basically the same in the long run, but no, maybe they aren't. And maybe where I'm coming from is a different emphasis. But I'd hate to think
it's a subtle difference. I think that right now they could divert, but right now they're kind of on train tracks together, but they're not interwoven. Like just because of this third wave, it doesn't mean that, kind of how we're seeing things or how animist populations have seen things doesn't mean we're there now, because of the inherent biases of how it had to come to be. And that might be a part of it.
Yes.
And I mean, so psychedelics, even in, say, Tantric Buddhism and Vajrayana in its sort of secret forms and mystery school forms, psychedelics are not new to this as wide awakening substances. It's not new. Same with the Eleusinian mysteries and a lot of the other mystery traditions. But they were used in a different way. You're right. They weren't necessarily being microdosed. That none of them would say that this is the way. It would have been a sacrament to the way.
Yes, it's part of the path, part of the overall practicing of developing oneself. Right. The ceremonies in my observation of ceremonies in some traditional cultures, yes, there may be some plant-based medicine experiences, but that's not the whole year of ceremonies. A lot of other ceremonies to integrate that into, and that's what's missing right now. And I think we're doing the psychedelic without the other parts, without the other ceremonial contexts.
For sure. And there are people having the sort of cultural appropriative conversations around it. I just don't think it doesn't have a full seat at the table on the implications of just how disenfranchised a lot of this technology is from a whole system design. Like, it's not in a holistic realm, especially if you can just continue doing your incredibly postmodern Anthropocene lifestyle, microdose, and get some benefits or see some change. Of course, you're going to see some change. You change your mind, you change the direction of your behavior. But is it awakening? Is it moving you towards a deeper integration with yourself, i.e. more energetic structures versus less energetic structures?
Yeah, yes. It's just another way of looking at it is my analogy here with the energetic structures, at least my perspective of what we're made up of, which most people are not aware of at all, other than chakras and kundalini.
Those are written about the most. So,
all right, yeah. So, well, thank you very much, Caitlin. I don't know if we can figure out a way to put this out, so at least it's something to be reflected upon by the professionals who are therapists or studying this. I like the question in the door. Let's look at this, let's research this, let's consider this, and see if it is something that we need to really pay attention to. I don't have an answer other than a concern, and here's some sort of understanding of how it is somehow limiting, potentially, at least for some people, at least some of the time. So,
yeah, let's keep the conversation going. I suspect it's one that will unfold.
Great, good. Caitlin, thank you so much. And are you available for people studying with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm available for private practice and for anybody to reach out and teaching classes. And it's CaitlinWelby.com.
So CaitlinWelby.com.
Yeah, correct. And there's a little information about psychedelic chaplaincy on there. There's just a sort of informatics page and some links and some resources.
All right.
And my private practice work.
I think it's awesome. When I heard that you were going to go into chaplain school, I said, yes, that seems really right on for her. You gave me some of the best recipe or direction towards making your own chocolate. I've come up with some kick-ass chocolate, I think, which you have to be kept in the freezer, and it's expensive to make, but everyone who tries it loves it, and it all comes from you, although I adapted it to a situation. So you're still a chocolatier in your heart.
Still a chocolatier in my heart. I made a little chocolate mousse with Chinese medicine in it this week. So I kept it going a little bit.
All right, cool. Caitlin, thank you very much. And we will be in contact here.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, my dear.
Bye.
Bye-bye.